Just let me know when you're about to share.
Yeah, we're sharing now.
Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. Lots of people joining again. Thank you so much. Welcome to the third webinar in the series. We're going to kick off straight away because we've got lots of great content for you, and it's going to be a little bit different this time. So welcome back to those of you who have seen the first and the second in the series, and a big welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. I really hope you enjoy this. I think it's going to be really crucial to how a lot of people are feeling this year. And I think we're going to be starting 2021 in the right mindset if you're on this webinar. So thank you again. It has been an interesting year. Now, I just want to start with a little bit of housekeeping. So as I said, it's going to be a little bit different this time for those of you that have joined before. We're hoping this is going to be a lot more interactive. You're going to be asked some questions, and you will be asked to pop those questions in the chat, the Q&A. So, and it's not just about questions. We're really looking for some comments too. So there's going to be some thought-provoking pieces coming through today. So would really love to know your comments around them, and we'll be sharing those, or not sharing them with everyone necessarily if you want to put them anonymously. But certainly we're really interested in your comments and your questions. So don't wait till the end, pop them all through as soon as you got the comments or the questions to hit us with, and we will run through. So my name's Janet Langley. I'm from Teamgage. I'm the solutions lead, and I'm about to introduce you to Leanne and Daniel from Aspen Solutions. So for those of you who've joined before, you probably know a little bit about Leanne and Daniel and Aspen already. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, and obviously you'll learn a little bit more as we go through today. So today is about building optimism for 2021. So Leanne and Daniel will be sharing some of their tools and techniques and the things that they do to build optimism. So that's one thing I'm going to pose right now for Leanne and Daniel is, you know, what is your favorite way to build optimism? What are your go-to tools? And I'm sure you're going to cover that as we go through the webinar. So I won't necessarily ask you to answer that now, but I think that's what people are interested in as well, is that what practical tools do you use? And then secondly, just to do a little bit of a light-hearted introduction, hopefully things will change in 2021 and we can get out and about a little bit more, and we can book some travel and some holiday. So I'm really interested in what's going to be the first place that you're going to go. What's your first holiday destination and why? So up to you, who goes first?
Okay, I'm going to go first, Janet. I think I'm going to head to Mexico. I've decided I want to go and do a yoga retreat. I want to sit on the beach. I want to be brought margaritas and tacos all day long. Yeah, I think that's where I'm heading, Mexico.
That sounds delightful. Well done. What about you, Daniel? That sounds really interesting.
Look, it does, and I think that's quite great. I think at some point I'll probably try and make the trek myself. I think for me, I want to get back to somewhere I've been, only because it means a lot to me. I think I'd probably like to get back to Bali, and certainly there's some really nice remote areas of Bali. So I'd probably like to get back there and probably hire a motorbike and just pretty much ride the coast along the sort of the western northern coast of that for an undisclosed amount of time, but just enjoying myself up and down along there. It's always a really good mental reset for me. So that's probably where I think I'll head to.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? It's about getting back to our own space and connecting to who we are and to the people and the places we love. Yeah, that's great. All right, well, I won't delay anymore. I will hand over to you now to kick off this webinar. I'm really looking forward to it. I will interject if there's anything that comes through, or the comments when the comments come through, and let you know how we're going. So over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Janet. And thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thank you to those of you who are joining us again, who've been on some of our previous webinars, and welcome to anybody who's joining us for the first time. Look, before we start, we did want to let you know that if you have joined us previously, this is going to feel a little bit different. Janet already touched on that, and it's different. It's different for a reason, and so we're going to maybe touch on a few emotional things today that might be a little bit uncomfortable for some of you. Because without stating the obvious, 2020 has been a tough year for so many of us in so many different ways. And, we've been facing and overcoming obstacles that none of us could have ever predicted. And so, after navigating the year that we've had, we wanted to look at ways that how can we keep our head up and how can we get through the last few weeks of 2020 and be able to move into 2021 with a sense of optimism. We all probably started this year going, yeah, new start of a new decade. This is awesome. And then it quickly kind of, so how do we go into 2021 with a sense of optimism? So we're going to start off today with a video, and we appreciate that as we play this video, it might be a little bit confronting. It might be a little bit triggering. It will no doubt evoke some emotion for you. And as you watch this, we want you to just think about what are actually some of the feelings and emotions that this is bringing up for you. I'm going to ask you just to share those in the Q&A box. Just a couple of words about what's actually coming up for you as we watch this. And then when we come back, we're going to have a little bit more of a chat about that.
So as I said, that we wanted to play that because we know it's going to evoke some emotion. It may trigger some people, bring out some really strong emotions. So we're hoping that you've taken a minute or two just to put some of those feelings and emotions and thoughts down in the Q&A box there, because we are really interested to understand what you think about this video, and more importantly, how do you feel about that? Because we want to talk about the idea of optimism and how we can start to develop and build that and lean into that in times when it's really necessary. Janet, could you help us out? Have we got some commentary in the Q&A section there?
Yeah, there's some lovely comments coming through. When I say lovely, I mean the fact that there's a variety of comments come through. Sure. Certainly, we're all having a mix of emotions here. People have mentioned that there's a tough year with optimism at the end.
Yeah.
One I really love the comment here is, life is precious. Live with kindness at the center of all that you do. And I think that's, it even evokes emotion in me, so I apologize for that. But that was one thing that it evoked for me. There's a lot of sadness in this video, but at the same time, it really makes you realize about the preciousness of life and the gratitude and the kindness that we can live with. So thank you very much for putting that. There's some other comments come through about thankfulness, sadness, hopelessness. There's lots of comments, crazy year, just sad. A lot of the sadness is quite a common one coming through. I totally agree with another comment that's come through about feeling so lucky to live in Australia. And that was one thing that really hit me. There's so much devastation going on in the world. And, you know, if we're going to live anywhere, Australia, for me, it has to be one of the best places to live. So some really great comments there. Your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears. So I think that's a great one about, you know, what can we do about it? And I'm sure you'll have some tools that we can talk about that. And someone's put here, I didn't even know about some of the non-COVID events. Our news channel was pretty much focused on COVID, which is very true. You know, sometimes we want to know about what's going on. Sometimes it, you know, it doesn't make it any easier to know what's going on.
That's a really interesting point. You know, for so many of us, 2020 will be defined by, you know, COVID, but when we watch that video, there's so many other things that have occurred that it's. And
there's a number of videos out there that really recap 2020 in a number of ways. And to that last comment, you're quite right, Janet.
There's another beautiful comment that
we haven't seen. Sorry, go on.
Sorry. There was another beautiful comment that just came through, which balances off. We were talking about emotions earlier on. Wherever there's sadness, there's also joy happening somewhere. So we need to look for those moments of joy. And I think that's the great thing that's coming out of this video, is that yes, there's tremendous sadness and in-depth negative emotions, but there's also some glimpses of positivity. And, you know, I think that's where your optimism is definitely going to lead into that.
Absolutely. And
thank you so much for everyone putting the comments through. Keep bringing them through. I will certainly look through them as they go. I haven't managed to get through all of them, but there's definitely some themes coming through there.
Thank you. And that is a beautiful segue about yes, there's a lot of very sad and devastating situations, but there's always moments of joy as well, which is exactly what optimism is about. So that kind of leads in beautifully to what we're here to talk about today.
It really does. Thank you, as you said, Janet, to everyone who's taken the time to put some comments and some ideas and some thoughts and feelings in that Q&A box there. What we want to do now is we want to move into another section, and we want to we said this was going to be a little bit different today, and we want to put this back to you, and we want to actually ask you, what situation has tested your optimism this year? We just want to take a moment now for you to sit back and think, is there a time or a situation, an event, or maybe a string of events, who knows, that has really tested your optimism this year, which has really made you question, where am I at, what am I doing? What we'd like you to do is, if you've got a pen and paper, or just make a note in your computer there, just maybe take a moment to jot down what that moment or event was, and just, what was that situation that tested my optimism, and what did I think and feel during that time?
You don't need to share that with us in the
Absolutely
Q&A.
not.
This is just, I guess, a personal reflection for you to think about a situation for yourself.
We've all had them. I know Leanne and myself both this year have had a number of situations where we've openly had to chat about, hey, on my optimism right now, we've had situations where, like everyone, our work has moved from much more of a face-to-face to a digital space, and that's okay. We were doing that, but it's changed a lot of that around. There were times where it's okay, well, how does this affect what our business looks like? And I'm sure many of you have gone through similar.
Okay, so we will come back to that scenario in a moment. So as we sort of move through this, we would like to come back and touch on that situation for you again. So I guess what we'd like to move into now is, why is optimism so important? And look, that might seem like a really obvious question, right? But let's actually consider why there are some really tangible reasons as to why being able to tap into, lean into, and exercise optimism is really important. So what we know is this, that by employing a habit of optimism, we take ownership. We also have an ability to generate new options, and we can even invent solutions to what at times, particularly in that moment, might seem like an unsolvable problem. But more than that, what we also know is research has shown us that people who can employ a lens of optimism, they're healthier, have stronger relationships, do better at work, and are more resilient. Because the definition of optimism is taking a proactive perspective of hope and possibility, which is a key component of resilience. In our workplaces, as a leader, having optimism, it increases your capacity to engage people as you're going through change. And we've all had so much change this year. And in turn, that has a larger impact on your overall organisation and your teams, because what we know is that our emotions are contagious. And there are direct links to relationships, effectiveness, and well-being are directly impacted by our optimism.
So let's talk about the importance of optimism and why we need to be able to develop and lean into it. So let's now have a look at what's the impact. If we don't have that optimistic lens and we can't lean into it, what can happen? For people who have really high consequential thinking, or those who think deeply and can tend to overthink things, if that's really high and the optimism is actually quite low, we can often find ourselves falling into a bit of a downward spiral. If we don't have that optimism to pull us back out, it can be really difficult. Now, when we look at the fact that if we do have a lot of optimism and our day-to-day continues to pile on, it can be even harder to get ourselves back out of that downward spiral. We can start to lose the light at the end of the tunnel, if you like. Our people are no different. So for leaders, it's really important to recognise this can happen to us, but it can also happen to our people. As Leanne just mentioned, it's what they call the emotional contagion. So those emotions, good, bad, otherwise, will be contagious to those around us. So if we're often feeling trapped or helpless, our people can feel the same, and often it can be even worse for them because they may not even be able to feel that they can make a change above that situation either. Now that can start to show up in ways of loss of motivation, maybe a rise in procrastination and resistance, and that can start to breed some sort of disruptive or negative culture as well. The impact of optimism and for ourselves and how that plays out for our people can't be understated, nor can the correlation between our optimism and our other areas of our performance. So we're just going to take a moment to have a look at how they show up.
So this here is some data from a real Teamgage client who measure optimism amongst a range of other metrics. And as we can see here, optimism is intrinsically linked to other areas of performance and the culture and the performance of our teams and our people. So what we can see here is when optimism is low, it impacts on effectiveness, relationships, and well-being. And when we're able to lift optimism, so too do those other areas increase. So if we can lean into optimism, it can take some effort, but when we can do that, and when we can actually have we don't leave it to chance. We've actually got to apply some effort into creating optimism, but when we can actually see the impacts that has in other areas of our lives, in other areas of our teams and organisations. So we're actually now going to have a look at a framework that can actually assist us with this. So what we know is that our energy flows where our attention goes. So if we're focused on this is hopeless, this is overwhelming, I don't know a way out of this situation, our energy is going to follow. It's going to be really, really hard for us to navigate through that. So when we're in those situations that we are a little bit challenged, simple framework we can do is ask ourselves these 3 questions. And the first one is this: is this situation permanent, or is it actually only temporary? So negative situations tend to sometimes feel so overwhelming and all-encompassing that it's sometimes hard to see light at the end of the tunnel, as Daniel mentioned earlier. But if you ask yourself this simple question, generally it's a good reminder that whatever this is, this too shall pass. So that's a really key question. Is it permanent, or is this actually only temporary? The second question to ask ourselves: is this situation pervasive, or is it actually isolated? What we mean by that pervasive is that many of us have a tendency to think that something negative happening in one area of our life is actually impacting on every area of our life. And sometimes it can really feel that way. But when we really stop and look at it and just take a step back, actually, is this all encompassing? Is every domain of my life impacted by this situation? Or is it actually isolated to just 1 or 2 areas? And the third question we can ask ourselves is, am I giving up, or is this situation taking up too much power? Or with a bit of effort, can I actually change this situation, change part of the situation? or even change the way I look at this. So what do we mean by giving up power? And that kind of comes from two angles. The first part of that is this situation completely outside of my control? I have no ability to influence or change this. Or am I giving away my power? As in, this is all my fault. I take full responsibility for this situation. Because when we come from a lens of feeling like we have no power, it becomes very difficult to change our view. Whereas if we can apply a bit of effort, maybe we can look at this a different way. So that's a framework that I can tell you I apply in my life all the time. And in fact, as I was driving here today this morning, I was thinking through my own optimism was challenged. And I literally had this internal conversation with myself this morning. And I can honestly say that it absolutely helps to move my thinking of feeling blocked into having some hope and possibility. So when we're in our workplaces, we can think about this. We can, when we have to communicate information to our teams and our people, and it might be something we know they've already been hit with so many changes or so much, I guess, unsettling information that, perhaps we now need to communicate something else. We can actually think about how we're going to communicate and frame this message. So we need to let you know of a change that's coming, and we know that it's not ideal, but this is only temporary. We'll only have to do this, or this situation's only going to last for a period of time. And whilst we know that it does have an impact, it's really only impacting this part of our business or this part of our team or this part of our role. And everything else remains unaffected. And while we might not be able to change or control this situation, what we're going to do is do everything we can to work our way through this situation to come out the other end. So even just thinking about the conversations we have with people, we can actually help to drive a focus of optimism.
It's a really good point at the end. That concept of that communication, when you start to frame it up in this way, you can start to then assist people to lean into their own optimism, and you can start to shift that mindset of this is the worst news ever to hang on a second, as you said, it's only temporary, it's only this part, and this is the effort we're going to apply to that process. With that in mind, and listening to what Leanne sort of mentioned about this and asking yourself those three questions, what we'd really probably like you to do now is just take a minute or two just to go back and maybe think about, when we asked you earlier, what was a situation that's tested your optimism this year? Just go back and put these three questions over that and just relook at that situation and maybe ask yourself, okay, is this a permanent situation or is it temporary? Is it pervasive or is it just a small area of this? And is it taking up all my power? Am I giving them all my power? Am I taking all the blame on board? Or is this some place I can apply some effort to think differently? And we'd be interested. We don't necessarily want to know about what your situation was because that might be personal to you. We'd really like you, though, in the Q&A section to put in there, if you apply this lens, does that change the way you view this? Does it open up some opportunities? Does that give you some space to go, actually, I could do this and I could do that and I could put some effort in here and I could change the way that's relating to me or the impact it's having on me. So we'd like to give you a minute or two just to maybe put down some of your thoughts and ideas about if you were to put this lens over, just in the Q&A section now.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think these three questions mean so much to me as well. And I think just even putting that lens over it gets us to think about challenges in a different way. And I know there's a comment about lockdown in Melbourne and bushfires. We had a really rough start to the year with the bushfires in Australia. And sometimes it feels like, that could be permanent. And there's people that have lost businesses and lost houses. And obviously you can't just rebuild a house straight away. But I think, how is that lasting? Is it the emotions that are lasting? Is it the experience that's lasting?
Yeah.
And how do we deal with that? Because we've all faced, or some of us have faced more serious issues than others.
Absolutely.
How does that work? And I love these three questions. I think it really, really gives an impact. So a comment's come through here about the framework, talking about being retrenched during COVID. Like they've said, it feels permanent.
Yeah.
Putting a temporary lens on it really helps because, how permanent is it? Like COVID, that seems permanent for the world now. And I guess COVID will always be around now, but is it a permanent situation the way we have it now? So yeah, that someone's put that it's a great framework. So, maybe there's more you can expand on that.
Yeah, and look, that's a really key point, Jenna, when we talk about it, the reality is COVID's probably not going away anytime soon. And, obviously there's, vaccines and things, but the reality is it's probably here to stay for quite some time.
Yeah.
But the restrictions that we have, or the way in which we're having to live our lives at the moment is only temporary. Obviously people are separated, they're not able to travel, and that can feel very isolating, but we have to believe and trust and know that it isn't always going to be this way. And even that first question, even if we don't look at any others, even if is this permanent or is it temporary? That's just a great place to start.
Yeah.
As I said, I use this, and I used this as recently as a few hours ago this morning when I was myself grappling and just navigating a situation in my own life. And I can tell you it absolutely works.
It definitely works. And I think for me, I actually like the one that's pervasive and isolating, because sometimes we have, one thing of our life that goes a little bit pear-shaped, and suddenly we think, oh, it's all a mess. Yeah. Well, it's not all a mess. It might be one thing in my personal life that might not be right, but my work life could be excellent. My issues with my family could be, or my relationship with my family could be excellent. And everything else could be absolutely great. So, but sometimes the emotions are so strong that we tend to believe that it's our whole life that's not going well.
Absolutely. And that's when we give the power away. We feel like it's helpless.
Yeah. And you're right. And we need to be aware that obviously the feelings and emotions can be incredibly powerful, and they can feel all-encompassing. As you said, Janet, I know yourself, you are a big advocate for the idea of exercising gratitude. That pervasiveness versus, is it just an isolated situation? As you said, it could be one small area of your life that in that instant, in that moment, it can feel hugely sort of encompassing of everything. When you start to actually put that lens over it and you go, actually, my family's good, my friends are good, my work life's good. Actually, it's just that one area. I've got all these other things I can actually be grateful for. Mm-hmm. It's a really good lens to use across that. So.
And that's even where the effort comes in, where even if I can't change the situation, how can I, with a bit of effort, can I change the way I view this? Can I think about things that are going well in my life? I know, Janet, you asked earlier if we actually had any strategies. And I said I use this framework all the time. But another strategy that we really like to use and really helps is to, take out your camera roll, your photo gallery on your phone and, favorite or highlight some of those photos where, really bring out optimism, really bring you joy. Put them into a separate folder, make them there and available so that on those days when you're struggling, you can just, with a click on your phone, you can actually, be reminded of things we are grateful for, things that are going well in our life, those moments of joy. And it's something that we can really just quickly tap back into, and it can sometimes help to change our headspace as well.
Yeah.
Jen, have we got any comments in the...
Well, there were some comments around gratitude, so that was a good segue there, Daniel. So that was great. And I think, people are always interested in how we do these things. So that's some of the comments coming through, certainly relating it back to Seligman's explanatory style framework around optimism. Absolutely. A lot of people understand that explanatory style. A lot of people have studied Marty Seligman, or at least know his work in regards to optimism. So, really important to understand what that background is. So yeah, I think there's some comments coming through about now how we use it and what it relates to. I'd love to see some more comments come through about just how this, I guess, this theory, we do put it into practice, but how has that changed the way you feel about some of those situations that you considered earlier on? So I'd love to see some more comments coming through about, what lens has this changed? And
maybe even it's a case of, what was the emotive feeling we had watching that video earlier? We had some commentary around how it was sad, or we felt helpless, or when we actually look back and we think about that video now, if we were to put this lens over it, what does that look like? Does that change that? Does that give us a slightly different perspective? Does it allow us to think differently about that as well? So maybe it's the instant you thought of yourself, or maybe it's even how you initially sort of reacted and felt toward that video.
Yeah, I'd love to see some of those emotions and how they might have changed. I know for me, when I was watching that video, yeah, there was definitely a lot of sadness there, but the little boy running into his mum's arms just was those moments that are just so important for us, you know, when we are going through trauma, just to, you know, if we can feel that, that's even better. But, you know, just to see images like that, and I know in Australia, we pulled together amazingly when we had the bushfires and things like that to support people. So, you know, that's what I'd love to hear more about. You know, how have your thinking changed or your emotions changed by seeing the video and then thinking about this theory.
So what we might do, please encourage people to continue to share any of that in the Q&A, but we will move on.
Yes, mentioned obviously it's a really good framework, and especially in the workplace as well, from communication perspectives, and for ourselves and for our people to be able to help sort of use the lens, if you like, of how we can view circumstances. What I want to do though is I want to move into a bit more of a space of, what about the here and now? What about when something happens to me right now? What are sort of some of the ideas or techniques I can maybe lean into right now for myself in this moment to actually work through this? So I'm going to have bring this up and just have a look at this now. So we talk about the here and now. Quite often it's really easy, and I'm sure this year it's felt really easy to go, I just want to get 2020 over and done with. I wish I could fast forward 6 months so we can be past this and we can move on. And that's really great in the sense of I want to get rid of all the negative stuff, all the horrible stuff, all the hard stuff. But as this statement says, the best of memories are made even during challenging times. Whose birthday or anniversary or engagement or circumstance would you have missed during that time as well? You know, the times that we have been able to see loved ones, or we have been able to get out, and, you know, what else would we lose if we skip just to get past that hard time? Because the best of memories are also made then. In saying that, while that's happening though, let's have a look at what we can do. And the first one we talk about here is the idea of name it to tame it. This is a way that what we can do is when we have a really a strong emotional reaction to something, what we need to do is understand that our reptilian sort of prehistoric brain, where the amygdala sits, that will generally flare up, and we've probably heard of the amygdala hijack. And when that happens, it stops our ability to think logically and clearly. So we need to use a technique like this so we can cool down the amygdala so we can function more effectively and think more clearly. Now, what this means is, when you think of it like this, put that feeling into as many words as you can. And even better if you can do that, maybe even make an analogy of what that might look like. Quite often we might hear, oh, I felt really uncomfortable, I felt like I had a big knot in my stomach, or, you know, oh, I just felt like I got punched in the chest and I've been winded. I feel really sort of just upset, confused, just bizarrely devastated by that. Whatever it is, think about the emotion that drives. So I'm upset, I'm confused, I'm hurt, I'm anxious, whatever that might be. The more words you can do about that, the more power you can take out of the emotion. So if you can name it, you can actually reduce its impact by about 50%, that studies have shown. The second one is set a feelings goal. Like we're taught, especially in business, to set goals that we want to achieve, whether it's this week, this month, this year. But we can actually set a feelings goal as well. So think about, okay, right now I'm in that moment and I'm feeling a little bit sort of reactionary or affected. How do I want to feel in 10 minutes time? How do I want to feel in 2 hours time, or by 3 o'clock this afternoon? Or how do I want to feel by the time I get home tonight at 7 o'clock? And then work out what are 2 or 3 things that you can actually do and put in order to create the feelings you want to generate. So it could be, okay, I want to take some time out right now just to sit with that, understand what it is, maybe put the lens of PPP-TIE over that. Maybe that's one of those things I want to do. And I want to take some time out just to get some fresh air and think that through, and how do I feel about it? So what do you want to do in that point to get to the goal of how you actually want to feel?
This is an interesting one as we go into Christmas. I know a lot of people go, oh, I just want Christmas to be out of the way. I dread it. It's so much work and cleaning and cooking. And so we can tend to feel quite overwhelmed about that. But if we think about how do we really actually want to feel on Christmas Day? Are we going to worry about, you know, the turkey and the table setting? Or actually, do we just want to feel, you know, do we want to feel love? Do we want to feel gratitude? Do we want to feel happiness? Do we want to experience joy? So we can even do that rather than wish away time and want it to go away. We can think about actually how would we rather feel or experience that instead.
We definitely can change our emotional state of goal. And, you know, Christmas this year, as you said, Maybe it's just a case of, I just want to feel grateful that we can actually all get together. Christmas is here. Maybe that's what that goal is for that one. The next one is build your safe place. Now, this is, we've always heard, you know, when something's going wrong, go to your happy place. And it is really kind of that. It's a comfortable brain space that you can visit so you can smooth out the rough edges of your feelings. With that said, though, really understand what this is and really design this mentally for yourself. You know, is this your favorite holiday destination? Is it the place you take your family? Is it that mountaintop that you like to climb? Whatever that might be for you. Is it your childhood tree house that you built? Whatever that is. But once you know what that is, really build that out. So when you're there, what are you seeing? What are you feeling? What are you hearing? Really think about what that all-encompassing space is and build that safe place for you to be in. So it is go to your happy place, but it's really design that. So it's kind of like grand designs for your own happy place, if you like. And the last one is one of Leanne's favorites. Anxiety your emotions. Now, what that means is, look, let me give some context to this. There's about 600,000 words in the English language. Most of us use anywhere from about 20,000 to about 35,000. And we've got roughly 3,000 words for emotions. But sometimes we still struggle to actually put a name to what it is, like I said before, name it. So be creative, create your own name for it. Maybe it's a mix of two emotions. Like anxiety, for example, is exactly what Leanne feels when she looks at that. She's anxious by that, but she also has a little bit of intrigue about exactly what it means. So it's anxious and intrigue, for example. As I said, if you don't know what the word for how you're feeling, I'll make one up. That one there, admirating. That's what Leanne feels about me a lot of the time. As much as she may admire me, she does find me highly irritating. And that's okay. Because the one that I have for Leanne is hilarity. And that sort of talks about Leanne's humour. She finds herself very hilarious. Yeah, quite often it's a bit of a tragedy. So we compromise. It's a bit of a hilarity, if you like. But as I said, you be creative. If you struggle to put that name to it and be able to describe that, make it up. Be creative. And you know what? Some people even draw their emotions or paint their emotions. However that might be for you, be creative around that and give yourself the ability to find it and have a use for that.
And as we said, that using photos that actually, building your safe place, that can even be, having some photos on your phone of whatever that safe place is for you, and actually just being able to take yourself there when you're finding that you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed. Janet, just before we move on, have we got any comments or anything in the chat?
Yes, definitely. There's a few comments that came through about the previous the 3 Ps, which is great. And I think one of the most important themes that are coming through is about the perspective. Sometimes we lack perspective on what's actually happening. And I think by putting those 3 Ps over it, it helps with the perspective and stops the overwhelm. So there's a few comments come through about perspective and overwhelm. And I think the overwhelm is really important. If we don't, and that links to the name it to tame it as well, I think if we just let these things keep happening to us and we don't stop and go, right, what is actually happening to us? What are the emotions? And name them, then I think that makes a big difference. And you touched on this before about, not wishing your life away. So I think, again, that's really important to be able to, even though we're having these challenges, sometimes we need to sit with it. So there's some good comments coming through around that. I personally love the safe place. I mean, yeah, for me, if I can just sit and look at blue sky and green trees and blue sea, then I'm very happy, whether that's in my mind or whether I'm actually at the beach or somewhere like that, then I'm happy. So I think the safe place really resonated with me. And I definitely laughed at the made up words. That's hilarious. And I love your examples around that. So I encourage people to, make up their own words if they can't find one that works. And I'd love to hear some comments come through about some of the words that they have made up.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's great. And we've also got a few comments coming through on that too. There's obviously a few people found that quite humorous. And I think the examples that you gave around that are brilliant. And it may not be, people may use those words, and feel free.
Feel free. They're not trademarked.
No,
all yours.
Please.
I am hilarious.
If you have a Leanne in your life, feel free to use hilarity. You're welcome to. But no, it is good because, as I said, and look, sometimes we have a mix of emotions. So we don't always just feel one emotion at one time. We can feel a combination, and sometimes they can be contrasting. And that's where that idea of, yeah, absolutely, you know,
yeah,
combining together, make it up for yourself.
Yeah, sorry, Daniel. I know when I first started looking at emotional intelligence, people got quite confused that they could have a positive emotion and a negative emotion at the same time. And quite honestly, that happens so much of the time because, you know, going back to the pervasive and isolated, there's always more than one thing going on in our life. So we could have joy about one thing and sadness about another, or we could have a humor that's tragic in one respect and funny in another. You know, so there are going to be a mix of emotions, and I think that's excellent. And you know, we've also got some comments coming through about you know, the connection to the name it and tame it, and I think that works well with your made up words as well.
You know, it's interesting, Janet. You made the comment about you know, we talk about overwhelm, and so, you know, that pervasiveness when we're in overwhelm. I know we were talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking to them about this situation, and, you know, using the 3 Ps, and what they realized when they stopped and reflected, said, I actually realized that at the moment this situation is actually only temporary and it's only isolated. However, if I don't actually apply some effort now, this has the potential to become permanent and pervasive.
Yes.
So that was a really good insight for this person, to actually stop and recognize and actually almost be able to intervene. Because, you know, they were feeling overwhelmed about it, but when they could actually really break it down, they had this really great insight that, no, actually, I need to take some effort on this right now, because otherwise in the future it is going to be a lot more serious.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to that don't wish your life away as well. Like we can be an ostrich and stick our head in the sand and hope everything's going to be okay in a week or two, or, you know, or a month or two. But if we don't actually put some effort in or take some form of action, then is anything going to change? We're going to take our head out of the sand again, and it's all going to be the same. So we've literally, you know, just buried ourselves for 2 weeks. So, you know, I think that's a really good point. Somebody has put a word, and I'm going to.
Oh, love to hear
it. Yeah, himpeldink. So the colour of a rich sunset, which is a natural beauty and such a calming environment. Himpeldink. I love it. I love it.
Oh,
it's okay. Yeah, good.
I love that.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
No, that's great.
That's a great one. I hope that one's not trademarked, because I might use that one too.
Absolutely. There's just going back on that, Jen, you mentioned a couple of things. You know, you talked about that idea that of that overwhelm, we can just have a huge amount of feeling in that sense, and not to let that control us as such. And it's really interesting with emotions and feelings that it's not necessarily about us controlling the emotions or feelings that we're having. It's actually about seeing and understanding and letting that. It's also about not letting them control us to a point where we give up all of our power in that moment as well. It's about learning how to navigate them, if you like. So, you know, when you mentioned that, I thought that's really a good point. You know, it's not about controlling them, but it's not about letting them control us either.
Yeah.
The other one you pointed out was, you know, that concept of, you know, a negative and a positive emotion being felt at the same time. We call them contrasting emotions, because there's not really any good or bad. They're all just emotions, right? But those contrasting emotions, just think of it like this. If we didn't have the ability to enjoy both of those at the same time, we wouldn't have wonderful things like sweet and sour pork, for example. So, you know, there's always good in those moments. So don't try and shut one out for the sake of the other, because you need to have that balance as well.
And that's a really key point, Tanya, because, you know, Brene Brown talks about, you know, when we numb one emotion, we actually numb them all.
Yeah.
So rather than, you know, I'm just going to push away this sadness, this hurt, this anxiety, I'm just going to push all that away, and I'm just not going to give into that. I'm not going to give myself permission to feel that. What you're also doing is pushing away joy and happiness and love and connection. So it's not about, you know, suppressing or numbing the emotion. It's actually about sitting with it, naming it, navigating it, and having some strategies to help you move through.
Exactly. And that's what we hope we've got here, you know, that the PPP-TIE model and framework, to put that as a lens, and certainly these sort of techniques here, when you're in that moment for yourself, that I can start to look at, okay, if I can name it, I can diminish that, or, you know, consider how do I actually want to feel, and then actually work towards that, having that wonderful safe place. And as you said, you know, the idea of creating that combination of words that really sort of is descriptive just to your individual. So we really hope that helps in that sense, and that's some strategies.
Yeah, and there's someone else has mentioned a strategy here, which I think is really great, and it's something I do quite regularly. So it links to the feeling goal. So there's a comment here: I used a feeling goal to get through hosting a family event. So whether that was a stressful event in their mind initially, maybe. And I planned for good emotions on the day. So I played music while I was prepping, had a dance around the house, and kept up positivity. So I think that's really great. So we want to be able to find ways to get ourselves in a positive emotion to sort of balance some of the negative emotions that may be happening. And I think
not that I want to know exactly who that was, but I'd love to know next time they're doing it, if they want someone to come around and just dance around and be silly while they're setting up, and I'll put my hand up now. I happily come around and just dance and muck around while setting up. That's kind of what I usually do, and I do those things as well. So
yeah, music is a really good thing. Music and dance for emotions, brilliant. Love that. Thank you.
Look, we are going to we want to have a look at something else that, it's something that we've all done once or twice, I'm sure, and let's have a bit of a different look and slant on it.
So we all know those moments when our, when our computers don't play so nicely, and nothing we try seems to work, and we just need to Control-Alt-Delete and start it all over again. And I think there's a lot of us who would like to probably just hit the Control-Alt-Delete button on 2020. But look, what we've come up with is a framework. We've still got a few weeks left, and we want to get through that as best we can. But here's something that might actually help. So what we can do is we can control ourselves. We can alter our thoughts, and we can choose to delete negativity. And I think there's been some really great examples of that coming through in the Q&A of different ways that people are doing that. So just a little takeaway for you, that hit the reset button, Control-Alt-Delete.
Absolutely. And it's not necessarily a resetting to throw everything out, but let's reset the way we view something or think about it, so we can control our situation and recome at that. So that's kind of where we come from with Optimism. So we hope you've taken something out of that, and we really appreciate everyone who's put some comments in the Q&A section. Do you want to take over from here?
I was just going to add on to that. I mean, I think that's a really useful point here about, Control-Alt-Delete. I think that's something we can all relate to, and also now put that in perspective as well. And one thing I wanted to touch on is that there are so many tools and techniques out there to work with emotions, to look at optimism, to inspire us. And I think, if we're able to delete negativity where we can and alter our thinking, but also bear in mind, if you've got strategies that work for you, then use them. Somebody's also mentioned the Tony Robbins triad is a great tool, and there's lots and lots of tools out there about changing state, changing emotions, looking for positivity. We've touched on a few around optimism, but this is such a massive topic. So, this is why we'd love you to share any strategies that you're already using. Definitely some great feedback about that Control-Alt-Delete, because I think, we've all heard that term so many times.
Oh, yes.
So that's excellent. Again, lots of positivity coming through around the different strategies that you've already spoken about. Still comments coming through about the 3 Ps, which I think is wonderful. So even if we can go away from today and just have those 3 questions as a reminder, and certainly I think I'm going to pin up the Control-Alt-Delete on my board here. Yes, someone's mentioned that's a brilliant, appreciate tips and guidance, which is fantastic. So lots of positive comments coming through now.
We'll be obviously sharing a copy of the slides afterwards as well, so don't feel you need to take photos and things. You will get a copy of these as well.
Yes, that's true. Yes, thank you. So has anyone got any other questions or thoughts? So please send them through now. Again, lots of comments coming through about that Control-Alt-Delete. So please send any through. Happy to answer any questions. We are happy to answer questions as they come on for a few more minutes. But other than that, we can move through, answer them at the end if any others come through, or as they come through. So I just wanted to mention, this is sort of feels weird changing the topic like this. So some of you who have been on the webinars before knew that we had an end of year special. So we have actually extended that just for this group. So if you are interested in looking at Teamgage for your organisation, we've extended the dates to Christmas. So if you can sign up before Christmas, I know we're very, very tight on time, and that's not where I intended. It kind of feels weird talking about that after such a wonderful subject. But anyway, so we'll move on from there. But
what I will say here, though, is how valuable, when we are looking at our organisations, sometimes optimism, whether somebody's really challenged with that, can sometimes be a little bit invisible. And especially when our workforces are now to some degree quite disconnected and remote. So to be honest, like, you know, without this being a sales pitch, because it's not what it's designed to be, the reality is that, as we saw from that dashboard earlier, that the graph earlier, that, you know, we know that there's a correlation between optimism and work, but Teamgage is absolutely that vehicle to help people to be able to see what's going on in their organisations, and when things are when people are feeling impacted, to be able to implement strategies. So.
Yes, and thank you for that. I was talking to a client about that this morning, so that's good. Another comment's come through, which you know, may take us back a few steps as far as you know, looking at what we could do. But somebody mentioned this at the beginning, like, we don't always know what's happening in the world, and media can be challenging for our optimism. And I think that's a really good point to recognise, is that sometimes we may feel very optimistic in our own kind of bubble or our own country or whatever that may be. But what do we do when media does test that optimism? What do we do when there's other things going on around the world on building our optimism despite the influences that are out of our control? So I think we've talked a lot about, you know, what we can do, but what if we can't do anything about that? Then what do we need to look at?
And look, that's a really interesting one. And I know that earlier this year, I actually made a conscious decision to choose what I saw in my feed. So I'm really clear about, you know, on social media, you know, on Instagram, who I'm following, so that I'm actually seeing things that are inspiring and positive for me. I choose at times and monitor based on my own, how am I feeling right now? You know what? Now's not the day for me to be looking at the news reports, because I actually just don't think it's good for me. And it's hard because it is everywhere. It's on our phones. It's everywhere we go. But for me, it's actually a conscious choice of what I choose to engage with. So I consciously select what I see in my social media feeds, and but that's a tough one. I don't know if you've got any thoughts around that.
No, look, it is a tough one, and you know, to that person's commentary before, it's really it really highlights that at times we can, I want to say be held hostage, but we can always be held hostage at times to what the media wants to dictate and show us, and we only see what necessarily they want us to see. So the best thing that, for me, I won't call myself skeptical. I'm incredibly inquisitive. I will always ask the question, why? So why are we seeing that? Why are we not seeing anything else? And I'm always looking to uncover, what am I not seeing? So there are, if you look hard enough, there are, I guess, if you like, news items that are outside of what we get fed, if you like. There's world news, and there's news far outside of that. The other side to that is, at times, you know, back to the other point that comment was, it can be really tough to only see and hear those same imagery over and over, and what can I do from over here? And that really comes down to just recognizing your place in that, and what do you control in that. And then it comes back to the PPTIE stuff about how much power does that give? Does that make you feel powerless, like you're helpless, and what can I do with that? Or with some effort, is there a way you can make a difference? Or if not, what can you do to ensure that, I guess, the bubble that you do control, and that sounds almost a little bit defeatist, but we can only control what's physically within our control. And I guess being able to be realistic about that is, you know, putting that lens of reality over that as well. If you're doing the best you can to be a good human being, and let's hope everyone is, that's kind of the best you can do. But I think someone made the commentary before earlier on, Janet, that was, you know, just be a good human and be kind to each other, and be good to each other. Like, it sounds really pedestrian and really sort of, you know, just fundamental, but just be a good human being. Like, you know, it's that's kind of what it comes down to. And just understand that there's going to be things that we can't control. What time and effort can I give to that, and what can I control, and make sure I'm doing that in that space?
Yeah, look, it's interesting, because I tend to go back to my version of the control model, and I think, okay, what can I control? What can I only influence, and what's totally out of my control? And as long as I know that I've done everything that I can control, and that means, you know, my internal monologue, my emotions, etc., and I've influenced as much as I can, you know, have I had the conversations with the right people? Is there anything else I can do to influence this situation? then that's going to make me feel a lot better about the things that are totally outside of my control. So I think I try and ask those simple questions. Can I control it? Yes or no? Can I influence it? Yes or no? And if I can't, I know my nan used to worry so much about the weather. There was nothing she could do about the weather, but she could control what she wore and when she went out and things like that. So, you know, that's always my example, my go-to. But I know we're getting towards the end of time, and there's some other comments that are coming through. Again, lots of positivity. Someone's put a comment on about a good news source. So for all of those who commented about the, you know, taking time to look at social media and delete negativity, Lisa's put a comment on about beautiful news. So if you perhaps Google beautiful news, it's a really good source of global positive news. And I've looked at that before, and it is a great one. So, you know, you do hear a lot more good news stories. It's not just, well, it's not negative at all. So yeah, thanks Lisa for sharing that. That's a really good reminder.
Perhaps maybe when we send the email out later, maybe we can actually put a link to beautiful news in there.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, we could certainly do that. Yeah, a few people have commented about that, removing triggering posts from social media. So that's obviously a very popular one. So, you know, think outside the box as to what we can do to, you know, to help our optimism. Someone's actually asked a question around the relationship between hope and optimism. And I hope I'm not missing some questions here, because there's lots coming through at the moment. Yeah, what's the relationship, in your opinion, between hope and optimism?
Well, look, optimism is I guess, is its definition is it's taking it's a proactive approach. It's taking a proactive perspective of hope and possibility. So, you know, without hope, it's very, very difficult to be optimistic. So when we feel this situation is hopeless, it's actually really, really hard to feel optimism. You know, to be able to move out of that, and that's where I think being able to, apply some of the frameworks we've spoken about. You know, Janet, you just spoke about that control. What can I control and what can't? And sometimes it's where we feel hopeless or helpless is when things are outside of our control. And so it's just about, you know, what is within my control.
I think for me, hope as well is we can hope for something, and that's a really nice ideal, if you like, or an idea. I think optimism starts to give us a bit of a mechanism of, well, how can I be optimistic? And if I'm optimistic, what am I being optimistic about? Which is almost the mechanism of how to build that hope up. So hope's the idea, whereas the optimism is, if I, for example, a PPTIE lens, for example, what steps or ideas can I put in place to build my optimism to make my hope real, if that makes sense. So hope for me is kind of like the ideal. Optimism is kind of like actually putting some steps on the ground to get to that hope. Yeah, that's kind of the relationship for me.
Yeah, I agree. Optimism to me has a little bit more of the drive and the action that's attached to it.
It's the actually moving into action. It's that taking that proactive approach. Whereas, hope is obviously tied into that.
Yeah, hopefully that answers the question. No.
Hopefully. All right. Well, I might just, I'm sorry if I've missed any comments that have coming through. As I said, lots of positive comments. So I do appreciate that. Might start to wrap up now, and someone's curiosity, but I better not. So yeah, I really, really appreciate everybody joining us on this webinar. Thank you so much. Definitely appreciate those of you coming back, and certainly for the new people that have joined us today. So thank you, Leanne and Daniel. Absolutely appreciate all your efforts with this. And yeah, I'm looking forward to revisiting some of these next year and coming up with a new webinar series next year. So there's a little bit of a teaser for you all.
And thank you to everyone at Teamgage. Thank you, Janet, and thank you to everyone who's joined us. We do hope that as you wrap up 2020 and as you go into your holiday season, that you can spend time with your loved ones, that you can have some time to rest, to recharge, and to get yourself ready for 2021. And, you know, if you've ever gone to the movies and you've seen the credits rolling through, and you just, you know, sometimes you get up and leave the cinema, but sometimes you stay and just sit in your seat a little bit longer, and you get just that little bit extra nugget at the end, like Ferris Bueller. For those of you who have to leave, we say goodbye. For those of you who are willing to sit in your seats to watch the credits, we do have one little final piece for you as we go out today.
Another little view, just to smile a little bit as we look at 2020.
It all seemed pretty great when 2020 was new. Billie Eilish swept the Grammys, we had Parasite too. But Brexit and impeachment, when the whole thing began, should have warned us 2020 was about to hit the fan. We all went into lockdown because of COVID-19. We kept our faces covered and our hands super clean. We couldn't get a haircut, so we looked really weird. And somehow all the toilet paper just disappeared. We went to work by Zooming on a pad or a phone. We couldn't go to movies, so we streamed them at home. But massive crowds of citizens still took to the streets. There were marches, there were rallies, there were zillions of tweets. 2020 brought us everything from fashion sweats and Tiger King, murder hornets, what a scare! TikTok dances everywhere, Bezos making crazy sums, sports in empty stadiums, and sad, and we said R.I.P. to Cody Chadwick, RBG. Political debates were full of bluster and flies. Getting COVID was the president's October surprise. The counting took forever when the ballots were in, till Biden said, "You're fired."
Let the lawsuits begin.
The whole West Coast was burning, there was financial stress.
Can we fly off to Wakanda and get out of this mess?
The year has kicked our butts and yet it won't lay us low. The time is up, so 2020, you've got to go. 2020, you've got to go. Your days are numbered, 2020, you've got to go. 2020, you've got to go. The time is up, 2020, you've got to go.
So thank you, everyone.
We really appreciate your time today. Thank you, everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you. That was great. Thanks, everyone.